picture a boardroom. The air is completely stale. You've got the PR team, and they're just sweating through their designer suits because the company's stock is in absolute free fall after this massive, undeniable corporate scandal.
Right, high stakes.
Exactly. The tension is thick. It's almost suffocating.
Hmm.
Or, scale it down to something much more intimate. Picture a living room. It's 2 in the morning. You're sitting across from someone who has just spent the last 2 hours twisting your reality into knots in a deeply manipulative argument.
Oh, a lot of people have been there. It's awful.
It is. Your heart rate is elevated, your thoughts are totally scrambled, and you just want the conflict to end. And then in both of these scenarios, someone leans across the table, looks you dead in the eye, and says those 2 magic words, "I'm sorry."
And instantly, the temperature in the room just drops. It is the ultimate tension release valve. Or at least, that is what human beings are socially conditioned to believe.
Right. From the time we're kids.
Exactly. From childhood, we're instructed that an apology is the definitive end of a conflict. It's the bridge meant to heal the divide, the social glue that repairs a fracture. When we hear those words, our neurological instinct is to just lower our defenses.
But what if those defenses are coming down at the exact moment they need to be at their absolute highest? In 2026, an apology isn't just a white flag. It's often a Trojan horse.
A tactical strike, really.
Yeah. And the sources we're unpacking today, which span behavioral science, forensic psychology, and even ancient Stoic philosophy, they paint a picture that fundamentally challenges everything we think we know about conflict resolution. Because we are not talking about genuine remorse today. We are deconstructing the false apology.
Because the data reveals something profoundly unsettling here.
Yeah.
A fake apology is not simply a failed or clumsy attempt at building a bridge. It is a highly calculated tactical strike. It's designed entirely to silence valid concerns, evade accountability, and manipulate the power dynamic of a relationship.
It's a weapon disguised as a remedy.
That's exactly it. A weapon.
And we are going to take you right into the mechanics of that weapon. Over the course of this deep dive, which, by the way, is episode 03 of our Unconquerable Mind series, we are going to equip you with the tools to completely decode the language of manipulation.
Because if you can't decode it, you fall for it every time.
Right. So if an apology is a Trojan horse, we first have to look at the literal wood it is built from, the words themselves. Let's move from the concept of a lie to the physical linguistics of how a lie is actually spoken in real time.
And that takes us directly into the realm of linguistic science. Before we can fully grasp the psychological manipulation at play, we really need to understand the structural architecture of deceptive speech.
The actual building blocks.
Yes, there's a defining characteristic of a false apology, a very measurable metric, which was brilliantly isolated in the 2025 linguistic research by Lavari. The defining feature is what the researchers term high syllable effort.
High syllable effort. Let's translate that for a second because it sounds almost entirely counterintuitive.
It does, yeah.
You would naturally assume that a liar, someone actively trying to deceive you or dodge responsibility, would want to say, as little as possible.
Right. Keep it brief so you don't mess up.
Exactly. The conventional wisdom is that liars want to avoid getting caught in a contradiction, so they keep their stories super brief. But the research points in the exact opposite direction.
It really does. Lavari's research analyzed the speech patterns of deceptive individuals versus truthful individuals in these high-stakes apology scenarios.
Yeah.
And they found this stark dichotomy in how humans deploy language when they've done something wrong.
What did the truthful ones sound like?
Well, truthful individuals, people experiencing genuine remorse, they use incredibly simple, direct, and brief language. They don't need to construct a narrative maze. A genuine apology is economical.
It's just the facts.
Right. It sounds like, I missed the deadline. I completely messed up my calendar. I am sorry, and I will have a report on your desk by noon.
It's clean. There is no ambiguity about who did what. The I is right there at the front of the sentence.
Exactly. I missed it. I messed up.
But high syllable effort operates on a completely different frequency. Let's do a quick role play to show what this actually sounds like. If the genuine apology is short and economical, what does the high syllable effort version of that exact same missed deadline sound like?
Oh, it sounds like a labyrinth. The deceptive individual will say something along the lines of, Embrace yourself.
Yeah.
Look, you have to understand that when the Q3 initiatives were passed down from leadership last month, there was a systemic miscommunication in the pipeline, which inevitably led to a cascade of scheduling conflicts on my end that, frankly, no one could have anticipated given the current macroeconomic pressures we are all facing.
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm sorry if the timeline got a bit shifted.
Just listening to that actually makes me physically tired, which makes me think of a squid.
Wait, a squid.
Yeah, think about a squid inking the water.
Okay, I'm with you.
When a squid is threatened by a predator, it doesn't just quietly slip away. It expels this massive, blinding, chaotic cloud of black ink. It completely disorients the predator, creating this huge smokescreen so the squid can escape in the confusion.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, because that is exactly what high-syllable effort is. The manipulator is using a massive cloud of syllables to ink the water. They're throwing out macroeconomic pressures and systemic miscommunications to blind you to the simple fact that they just forgot to do their job.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism at play here. They are over-informative by design. They deploy strategic phrasing and just an absolute excess of syllables to bury the simple truth under a suffocating mountain of unnecessary details.
Justifications, contextual background, all of it.
Exactly. And if we look at the cognitive science behind this, they are doing it to conserve their own internal emotional currency.
Okay, break down that concept for me, emotional currency, because it sounds like they're spending a lot of energy talking. Why is a long, rambling excuse cheaper for them than a short, direct apology?
Because true accountability is incredibly expensive from a psychological standpoint. To deliver a real apology, you have to expend massive emotional energy. You have to admit fault.
Which hurts the ego.
It crushes the ego.
Yeah.
You have to lower your defenses, internalize the guilt of causing harm, and then, the hardest part, commit to the hard work of behavioral change. That is exhausting.
It takes a toll.
A huge toll. The manipulator wants to avoid paying that emotional toll. So, by inking the water with high-syllable effort, they transfer the exhaustion onto you.
Wow.
They make the listener do all the cognitive work of sorting through the excuses, the timelines, the passive voice.
They wear you down. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on the receiving end of a monologue like that. And by minute 15, I'm thinking, I am so exhausted by this dissertation on why you relate that I don't even care that you relate anymore. Just please stop talking.
Which means the tactic worked perfectly.
Right.
The exhaustion is the point. The manipulator has successfully avoided accountability by turning a simple admission of guilt into a test of your endurance.
That is so insidious.
It really is. So, as you listen to this, take a moment to mentally review the last convoluted apology you received. Just play it back in your head.
Yeah, think about it.
Did it feel like a simple, clean admission of fault? Or did it feel like you were navigating a labyrinth of justifications? Did you walk away feeling more confused after the apology than you did before it?
Because if the syllable effort was intensely high, you were likely dealing with a tactical deployment of words designed to evade, not an expression of remorse designed to heal.
Exactly.
Now, if they are inking the water, we need to understand that they aren't just throwing random ink. Manipulators don't just use a chaotic jumble of words, right? They use highly predictable blueprints.
Very predictable.
Once you study the sources, you realize the structure of this manipulation is basically standardized across human behavior. The Unconquerable Mind Core script breaks this down into what they call the 5 archetypes of the faker.
Yes. Moving from the sheer volume of words to the structural architecture of the manipulation is crucial here. These 5 distinct blueprints show us exactly how manipulators twist the concept of an apology to serve their own ends.
Let's weave through these archetypes because I guarantee they show up everywhere, from corporate Slack channels to, Thanksgiving dinners. Let's start with archetype number 1, the lawyer.
Ah, the lawyer. This archetype is entirely obsessed with technicalities. They treat interpersonal relationships like a hostile deposition.
Like you're on the stand.
Exactly. The core script of the lawyer is something like, I didn't technically lie, I just omitted the truth, or show me exactly in writing where I promised I would do that.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard that one.
Right. What they're doing is avoiding the heart of the issue, which is the emotional or professional harm they caused, by turning the interaction into a semantic courtroom.
I see this constantly in toxic workplace environments. The focus shifts entirely away from the impact of the action and hyper-focuses on the definition of the action. You aren't arguing about whether they undermined you in a meeting. You are forced to argue about the dictionary definition of the word undermine.
I wasn't undermining you. I was just offering alternative optics.
Right. Alternative optics.
And if they can win on that semantic technicality, they feel completely absolved of the moral failure. It is a brilliant, albeit totally destructive, evasion tactic because it forces the victim to become a prosecutor.
You're suddenly gathering evidence.
Yes. You have to cite precedents, prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt, just to validate your own feelings of being wrong. It's exhausting.
Which brings us to a slightly more insidious blueprint, honestly. Archetype number 2, the victim player. If the lawyer uses technicalities to escape, the victim player uses sheer guilt.
And the victim player is incredibly common and highly, highly destructive because it fundamentally alters the reality of the situation. This archetype flips the script so flawlessly that their mistake is magically transformed into your fault.
How does that even work? Give me an example.
Their apology sounds like, "I'm sorry I yelled at you, but I only did it because you made me feel so incredibly stressed." Or, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth, but you are always so demanding that I was terrified of your reaction."
Oh, wow. So they use the word sorry, but if you look at the actual payload of the sentence, it's an accusation.
Exactly.
They are essentially saying, my bad behavior is actually just a symptom of your character flaws.
That's a great way to put it. They are extracting an apology from you while pretending to give you one. They weaponize your empathy. By painting themselves as the victim of your expectations or your reactions, they force you into a position where you end up comforting them for the harm they caused you.
It's a masterful sleight of hand. You go in angry, you leave comforting them, which leads to a completely different approach. If the victim player wants you to take the blame, archetype number 3 just wants to drown the blame in total ambiguity. The sources called this one the blanket bomber.
The blanket bomber is the master of the vague generalization. This is the individual who throws their hands up and says, "Look, I'm just sorry for everything, okay? Whatever I did to make you mad, I'm sorry. Can we just move on now?"
It sounds like a surrender.
It does.
On the surface, if someone says, "I'm sorry for everything," it feels like a total capitulation, like they're waving the white flag. But it's actually the opposite of accountability, isn't it?
It is an absolute evasion. They are apologizing for the abstract concept of everything, so they never have to take accountability for the specific one thing they actually did wrong.
Because if they admit to the one thing, they have to change it.
Precisely. Accountability requires a pinpointed acknowledgement of a specific action. You cannot measure improvement. You cannot establish a new boundary if the apology was for everything in general. The blanket bomber wants a clean slate without having to identify the dirt they're wiping away.
So let's say you're dealing with someone who chronically interrupts and belittles you in team meetings. If you confront them and they say, "I'm sorry for everything, I'm just a bad person."
Right. Playing the martyr.
Yeah, they haven't actually agreed to stop interrupting you. They've just thrown a giant blanket over the entire relationship.
And if you bring up the interrupting again, they'll say, "I already apologized for all of that."
Exactly. Okay, that brings us to number 4. And this one is perhaps the most famous of the fake apologies. The phantom.
Ah, the phantom. It is defined by one specific chilling phrase. "I'm sorry you feel that way."
The ultimate non-apology. It makes my skin crawl just hearing it.
It's awful.
I want to ground this in a really relatable scenario for the listeners. Imagine a family Thanksgiving dinner. You have a passive-aggressive mother-in-law who makes a deeply cutting remark about, say, your career choices or how you are raising your children.
Classic scenario.
You pull her aside later to say that the comment was hurtful, and she looks at you with wide, innocent eyes and says, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way." Let's dissect the anatomy of that sentence. What is actually happening there?
What's happening is the complete ghosting of their own actions. The phantom apologizes for your emotional reaction, entirely divorcing themselves from the action that caused that reaction.
They just sever the link.
Yes. In your Thanksgiving scenario, she isn't apologizing for insulting your parenting. She is expressing mild regret that your emotional regulation is so poor that you chose to be upset by her perfectly reasonable observation.
Oh, that's infuriating.
It positions her as a sympathetic bystander to your irrationality.
It makes the victim feel completely crazy because the language mimics empathy. "I'm sorry you feel" sounds like care, but it's actually clinical detachment.
Yeah.
It's essentially saying, your feelings are a phenomenon happening over there and I have nothing to do with them, but it's a shame you're struggling.
It really creates a massive cognitive dissonance for the victim. You know you were harmed, but the person who harmed you It's acting like a concerned therapist observing your pain from a distance.
It's so patronizing.
Extremely. Which transitions perfectly into the final archetype, number 5, the gatekeeper. And this one relies heavily on power dynamics.
The gatekeeper, when I was reviewing the source material on this, it immediately made me think of an extortion racket, like a mob boss stepping into a local business.
That's a very apt comparison. The gatekeeper treats the apology not as an expression of remorse, but as a binding legal contract or a bribe.
A bribe.
Yeah. The script is usually something like, I said I'm sorry, so you aren't allowed to be mad anymore. Or, I apologized yesterday, why are you still bringing this up?
Let's apply this to a corporate setting. Say you have a micromanaging boss on a Slack channel who completely humiliates a junior employee in front of the whole department. The boss later sends a private, quick, sorry if I came off harsh message.
A classic half apology.
Right. But the next day, the employee is still clearly shaken, and the systemic issue of the boss's temper hasn't been resolved at all. The boss notices the employee is quiet and says, look, I gave you an apology. We're done talking about this. They are essentially saying, I have purchased your silence with these 2 words.
That is precisely the dynamic. They are gatekeeping your right to process your own emotions. The I'm sorry token was a transaction. Once they hand it over, they believe you owe them immediate forgiveness and absolute silence on the topic forever.
It's like a receipt.
Yes. And if you bring up the hurt again, even an hour later, the gatekeeper flips the script so that you become the aggressor because they already apologized. It is a stunning reversal of power. They dictate the timeline of your healing.
These archetypes, the lawyer, the victim player, the blanket bomber, the phantom, and the gatekeeper, they are precision engineered to make the victim feel guilty, confused, or contractually obligated to shut up.
And they work incredibly well.
But seeing them laid out like this naturally leads to a massive question. If these archetypes are so blatantly manipulative, if the ink is so obvious when we analyze it from a distance, why do we fall for them in the moment? Why does the human brain accept the Trojan horse and happily wheel it right inside the city walls?
To answer that, we have to move from the tactics of the manipulator to the profound psychology of both the victim and the offender. We have to look at the mechanical core of the false apology.
Let's get into the mechanics.
There's an acronym that is becoming increasingly vital in forensic psychology. It's heavily cited in the landmark 2024 PLOS-1 study by Harsey, Adams-Clark, and Freyd. The acronym is DARVO.
DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. I want to spend significant time here because understanding DARVO is like looking at the underlying code of human manipulation.
It really is the source code.
It isn't just random defensiveness. It is a highly predictable systemic sequence. Let's break down the sequence step by step for the listener.
The sequence is remarkably consistent across different types of abusers and manipulators. Step 1. They deny the harm. But this isn't just a simple, I didn't do it. In a DARVO scenario, the denial is an active assault on your reality.
It's aggressive.
Yes, it sounds like that never happened, or you're remembering that completely wrong, or you were imagining
The
things.
classic gaslighting phase. They don't just deny their action, they deny your sanity.
Exactly, which sets up step 2. They attack the person demanding the apology. Once they have destabilized your reality, they go after your credibility, your memory, or your character.
How does that sound in practice?
The script shifts to, you're always so hypersensitive, or you have a terrible memory, or you're just trying to start drama to ruin my reputation.
I want to introduce an analogy here because reading through the PLOS-1 study, it felt less like an argument and more like psychological judo.
Oh, I like that. Judo.
Yeah, because in judo, you don't fight force with force. You use your opponent's own momentum against them. The victim comes into the conversation with the momentum of wanting accountability. The manipulator sidesteps the accountability, that's the deny phase, and then trips the victim using their own weight, putting them on trial. That's the attack.
The psychological judo analogy is highly accurate because it leads directly to the final, most devastating step, the throw itself. They reverse the roles of victim and offender.
The RVO in DARVO.
Exactly. Through the denial and the attack, the manipulator constructs a completely inverted narrative where they are the one being unfairly persecuted by your cruel, irrational demand for an apology.
So the person who originally caused the harm is now demanding sympathy, and the person who was harmed is now defending themselves against accusations of cruelty.
It's dizzying.
It is. And the psychological payload of this tactic is what researchers call betrayal blindness. What does betrayal blindness actually look like inside the mind of the person receiving the fake apology?
Betrayal blindness is actually an evolutionary survival mechanism. Human beings are deeply dependent social creatures. When we rely on someone for our survival, our livelihood, or our deep emotional security.
Like a boss, a spouse, a parent.
Exactly. Whether it's an employer holding our paycheck, a spouse we have built a life with, or a parent. When that person betrays us, recognizing that betrayal is neurologically shattering. It threatens our core security.
Because if you acknowledge the betrayal, you have to acknowledge that you are entirely unsafe. The ground beneath you isn't solid.
Precisely. So when the offender deploys Darvo, the victim's brain is put in an impossible bind. Do I recognize this betrayal and risk losing my job, my marriage, my family? Or do I accept the reality?
And the brain takes the path of least resistance.
Always. Our brain seizes on the manipulator's false narrative because it's fundamentally easier and feels safer to believe that we are crazy or we are overly sensitive than it is to accept that the person we rely on is actively harming us.
It's safer for the brain to blame itself than to recognize a predator inside its own tribe.
Yes. Darvo successfully implants a deep, entirely unnecessary guilt in the true victim. We accept the false apology, the Trojan horse, because our brain is desperate to restore the bond of attachment, even if it means betraying our own reality. The cognitive dissonance is resolved by the victim taking on the blame.
That is heavy. When you realize the person you trust is essentially running a psychological script on you, and your own brain is conspiring with them to keep the peace, it completely changes the landscape of the relationship.
It really does.
But there is another layer to this, and this is the part from the sources that really requires us to look at the manipulator's mind. It's the February 2025 research from Penn State on diagnostic self-deception.
Ah, yes. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle because it answers a question victims constantly ask themselves. Do these manipulators know they are lying?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. When someone hits you with Darvo or they deploy the victim-player archetype, they often sound so genuinely, passionately sincere. They cry real tears. Their voice shakes with indignation.
It doesn't look like acting.
It doesn't. So how can they sound so sincere if it's all a calculated tactic?
Let's look at the mechanics of cognitive dissonance within the manipulator. What did the Penn State researchers discover about why they sound so honest?
They discovered that the most effective manipulators deceive themselves first. This is diagnostic self-deception. The ego of the manipulator is often incredibly fragile.
Paradoxically fragile.
Yes, it simply cannot withstand the identity-shattering reality of being the bad guy. If they accept that they caused harm, their self-image collapses. So their subconscious mind goes to work to protect the ego. Before the words even leave their mouth, they have convinced themselves that their harmful actions were entirely justified.
Give me an example of how this internal rewriting happens. Let's take a manager who steals a massive client from a junior colleague.
Okay, in reality, it was an act of sheer professional theft. But the manager's ego cannot accept, I am a thief. So the internal monologue begins the rewrite.
How does that sound?
It sounds like the company's quarterly numbers are failing. I need to provide for my family. The junior colleague didn't have the experience to handle the account anyway. Actually, the client prefers me. I was saving the account for the company.
Wow. They build a whole alternate universe.
Yes. By the time the manager sits down to deliver the fake high-syllable apology to the junior colleague, they have completely rewritten their own history.
It's an internal PR campaign for the manipulator's own ego.
Exactly. They tell themselves a story where they are the tragic hero making a tough call. By the time they say the words, they actually feel honest.
Which means the cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable, grating feeling of knowing you did something wrong but desperately wanting to believe you are a good person, is resolved because they have successfully calmed themselves.
Yeah.
This is why it sounds so chillingly sincere to the listener, because in that precise moment, the liar actually believes their own lie.
Which makes them incredibly dangerous. You are not dealing with a cartoon villain who is secretly twirling a mustache and rubbing their hands together in malice.
Right, there's no evil cackle.
No, you are dealing with someone whose very perception of reality has been distorted to protect their own ego. Trying to extract a genuine, accountable apology from someone in a state of diagnostic self-deception is like trying to draw blood from a stone.
It's pointless.
It is fundamentally impossible because in their constructed reality, they do not believe they did anything wrong.
So if I'm applying that, it means arguing with them is entirely pointless. You are arguing with a fiction they have accepted as fact.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have mapped the linguistic smoke screens of high syllable effort. We have identified the 5 archetypes of the faker. We have exposed the psychological judo of Darvo and the impenetrable wall of self-deception. We know how the weapon works. The final step of this deep dive has to be defense.
Yes, defense.
How do you respond to a highly evolved emotional attack without losing your own sanity?
To find the defense, we actually have to transition from modern forensic psychology to ancient defensive strategy. Because the solution to this deeply modern psychological warfare was actually articulated over 2,000 years ago. We look to the Stoics.
Specifically, the philosopher Epictetus and his concept of the inner citadel.
Yes. Stoicism teaches a very stark, very liberating truth that perfectly counters Darvo. It teaches that an apology is an external event.
An external event, meaning it exists outside the walls of our control.
Completely outside. Whether a person is standing in front of you being perfectly sincere, or whether they are wrapped in layers of Darvo and self-deception, is fundamentally none of your business.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
It is, but it's true. You cannot control their intent, you cannot force their honesty, and you cannot grant them self-awareness. Your only business, the only territory you actually sovereignly rule, is your internal reaction, your inner citadel.
This brings us to the core of the Stoic Shield toolkit from our sources. In modern psychological terms, this is often related to the concept of becoming a gray rock.
The gray rock method, yes.
An unreactive, boring, impenetrable surface to emotional manipulation. Think about the psychological judo analogy. When a manipulator wants to trigger you to start the Darvu cycle, they need you to push back.
They need your momentum.
Exactly. They need your momentum. They need you to get emotional, to argue the facts, to defend your character. The Stoic Shield gives you 3 distinct maneuvers to deny them that energy, to become a brick wall that they cannot throw. The first maneuver is clarity.
Clarity is the objective verbalization of the boundary. The script is incredibly simple, and it requires 0 emotional inflection. You just say, I accept your apology, but the boundary remains.
This is so dry.
It's meant to be. Notice what is happening here strategically. You are not arguing about whether the apology is fake or real. You are not debating their self-deception. You are simply refusing to let the apology act as a bribe.
You're just taking the token and saying, cool, still not changing my mind.
Exactly. You accept the words at face value, but you do not alter your protective boundaries.
It neutralizes the gatekeeper archetype instantly. The boss says, I'm sorry, so you can't be mad. You respond with clarity, I accept your apology, but the systemic issue still needs to be addressed. Boom, the transaction is declined.
Yes, completely shut down.
The second maneuver is recentering.
Recentering is the specific countermeasure to the victim player and the phantom. When they say, I'm sorry you feel that way, or they try to make your emotional reaction the center of the conflict, you recenter the focus on the undeniable facts of their action.
What's the script for that?
The script is, we aren't talking about my reaction, we are talking about your choice.
I love that. You refuse to be put on trial.
You are stepping completely outside of the Darvi cycle. You're denying them the attack and the reverse victim and offender phases by simply pointing back to the initial action. You do not defend your feelings, you highlight their behavior.
It's brilliant. And then there is the third, and I think the most powerful maneuver, sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
This isn't just a script you memorize. It's a fundamental internal realization. It's the absolute unshakable conviction that your peace of mind is simply not for sale for a fake, I'm sorry.
This is where the writings of Marcus Aurelius become incredibly practical. In his Meditations, he writes, kindness is invincible, but only when it's sincere, with no hypocrisy or faking. For what can even the most malicious person do if you keep showing kindness and gently point out where they went wrong right as they are trying to harm you?
Let me pause you there, because that quote is dense and can easily be misunderstood. He is not saying that you should be a doormat. He's not saying you should just be nice to your abuser.
No, absolutely not. Attacking them feeds their victim narrative. It gives them the momentum they need for the judo throw. What Marcus Aurelius is advocating for is an unbreakable, almost clinical objectivity.
The truth seeker's rule.
Yes. If we follow what the sources call the truth seeker's rule, we realize that our primary allegiance must be to reality. The quote continues, what harms us is to persist in self-deceit.
Meaning their self-deceit shouldn't become ours.
Exactly. If you can look at the person giving you the false apology, recognize the high syllable effort, identify the lawyer or blanket bomber archetype, and clearly see the diagnostic self-deception operating behind their eyes, you are no longer a victim, you are an observer. If you choose not to be harmed by their fake apology, you aren't harmed.
How does one actually manage the physical reality of doing this? Because standing there, listening to someone gaslight you and choosing to be an observer, it goes against every instinct in the human body.
Oh, your body wants to fight.
Your heart rate spikes, your face gets hot, you want to scream, you are lying. How do you stay on the wall of the inner citadel when your body is sounding the alarm?
It requires intense behavioral conditioning. It requires recognizing that your physiological response, the spiked heart rate, the heat in your face, is a reaction to a perceived threat. But the Stoic realization is that their lie is not a threat to your reality unless you agree to it.
You have to detach.
You regulate your breathing, you slow down your speech, and you mentally label what they are doing. There is the high syllable effort. There is the reverse victim step. By turning it into an analytical exercise, you disengage the emotional fight or flight response.
You literally become a behavioral scientist studying a subject in real time. I mean, I marvel at the profound power of this mindset. Think about what it actually looks like in practice. You don't have to debate the lawyer on their legalistic technicalities.
No.
You don't have to comfort the victim player who is pretending to be crushed by your boundaries. You just stand on the wall of your inner citadel. You watch the Trojan horse roll up to your gates. You see the fresh paint. You hear the muffled sounds of the soldiers hiding inside. And you simply refuse to open the door.
You just leave it outside.
You don't have to set the horse on fire. You don't have to run out and attack it. You just look down and say, "Cool horse," and keep the boundary locked.
Cool horse is a very modern translation of Epictetus, I'll say that. But functionally, it is entirely accurate. Emotional sovereignty isn't about winning the argument. It is not about forcing a manipulator to suddenly achieve self-awareness, break through their self-deception, and feel genuine remorse.
Which we know is impossible.
That is a fool's errand. Sovereignty is the quiet, unbreakable ability to see the lie, recognize the mechanics for what they are, and remain entirely unbothered.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, there is one final provocative thought that emerges from connecting all these dots. It's something that is the inevitable result of everything we've discussed regarding cognitive dissonance and energy.
You are referring to the rebound effect.
Yes. Let's look at the energy expenditure of the manipulator. They've deployed the exhausting high-syllable effort. They've carefully selected a manipulative archetype.
They've done a lot of work.
They really have. They have initiated the complex, multi-stage psychological theater of Darvo. They have engaged in the heavy lifting of diagnostic self-deception. They have built this massive, intricate psychological trap, expecting you to step into it and provide the emotional reaction they need to complete the cycle. But what happens when you respond with absolute stoic indifference?
The gray rock.
What happens when the judo throw meets a brick wall?
The energy has nowhere to go. When you refuse to play your assigned role in their play, when you refuse to be the attacker or the comforter, the cycle breaks.
The cognitive dissonance rebounds directly back onto them.
Exactly.
By refusing to be angry, by refusing to argue, by just being a gray rock observing their behavior, you act as a mirror. You force them to sit alone in the uncomfortable, echoing silence of their own self-deception. Without your emotional reaction to feed on, the illusion they built to protect their ego starts to starve.
It is the ultimate expression of a boundary. You are protecting your inner citadel, and in doing so, without firing a single shot, you are exposing the absolute fragility of their deception. They are left holding a Trojan horse outside a locked gate with no one to open it.
So we leave you with this. A high-value question to take into your week, to mull over and apply the next time you find yourself in that stale boardroom or that tense living room. Think of the last apology you received from someone who constantly drains your energy or bends your reality.
Really picture it.
Play the tape back, look at the syllables, look at the archetype. Was it an act of repair? Or was it just failure management? Was it a bridge or was it a Trojan horse?
Wow.
And what would happen if next time they wheel that horse up to your gates, you simply gave them nothing?